Do you remember when former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his immigration minister Mark Miller, after the open borders policy, after flooding the country with many migrants into communities that just don't have the system, don't have the necessities, don't have the services need to provide to people, came forward and said that, hey, we got to turn things around. We got to maybe start putting a cap or a pause on the amount of foreigners being flooded into this country. Well, as we stated, that seemed like a good idea, but it was probably a false promise just to soak in more votes. And it looks like that is the case here, according to this Global News article, where it says foreign student asylum claims hit record high in 2024, set to grow in 2025. So the good news is, while there's a situation with immigration, while we have illegal migrants flooding into Canada, clogging up the system, getting abused by the temporary foreign worker status that's abusing not only the migrants themselves, but also the Canadian workers that are being stymied out of the industry to be replaced. While this is going on, we're getting closer to that century initiative promise that by the end of the century, we're going to have a population of 100 million, just pouring in these people without the services, without the necessities, without any sort of reaction, without any sort of legal process to deal with the amount of people pouring in. So international students filed a record 20,000 asylum claims last year, with 2025 on track to surpass that number, according to the federal immigration data obtained by Global News. The claims are rising even as Ottawa cuts the number of study permits it issues, with Prime Minister Mark Carney pledging, like his predecessor Justin Trudeau, to return Canadian immigration to sustainable levels. That's what they keep promising. Oh, we're going to put a slight pause. We're going to put sustainable levels. We're not actually going to do the checks and balances to hold people responsible for basically human trafficking into this country. We're not going to do any of that. But we're going to calm your nerves down. We're going to go on TV, calm you down, and say, we're going to put a slight pause on things. The newly released figures also suggest that 2025 could see an even greater number of claims by foreign students. In the first 3 months of the year, international students filed 5,500 asylum claims, at a 22% increase from the same period last year. The data from Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada show the number of international students seeking asylum last year was nearly doubled the 2023 figures, a 6-time higher than in 2019. Immigration lawyers say the numbers will keep trending upwards as the federal government restricts previous available pathways to permanent residence, and as the backlog for adjudicating cases continues to balloon. The government has closed a lot of its doors for international students to apply for permanent residence through regular streams, said Toronto-based immigration and refugee lawyer Chantal Dolores. As a result, it's funneling people to look for other solutions. During his first news conference as Prime Minister, Carney repeated his pledge to cap the total number of temporary workers and international students to less than 5% of the Canadian population by the end of 2027, down from 7%. This will help ease strains on housing, on public infrastructure, and social services, said Carney on May 2nd. The thing about that statement, though, is that's a temporary pause. That's not set in stone. That's not an official locked step that they're going to cut back immigration. What they're saying there is, we're going to take a slight pause. We're going to cut back the number of people so that communities can get themselves together and build up more houses, do all this stuff, get themselves ready. Then we'll pour in more people. Because again, Mark Carney, who was involved with the Century Initiative, who just hired on a former BlackRock advisor and part of the Century Initiative as his advisor, is telling Canadians that they need a population of 100 million people, saying that the birthing rate is low, that not enough young people are having families. But they're not saying anything to help people sustain a good income so they can provide and actually start a family. They're not doing any of that. But they're going to flood in as many migrants as possible. And this is happening all across the West because people like George Soros and Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all these other huge multi-billionaires that really do control the world are initializing this so they can abuse the population, take on these migrants, abuse them for cheap labor, which the UN has even called out on this. The UN is calling out Canada for using modern-day slave tactics for abusing temporary foreign workers, and they're flooding in this country as ultimately a replacement. That's where the great replacement theory comes in. That they're flooding in people to use as cheap labor to drive out the Canadian workforce. And eventually it's going to turn into robots. So it's a lose-lose-lose situation all the way. And I don't blame the immigrants. Like I said, I'm very pro-immigrant. I'm very pro-legal immigration. If you go through the proper checks and balances, I have no problem with you in this country. I have no problem with people. But as we're seeing here, there's a lot of fraudulent documents. There's a lot of cases where NGOs, the billionaire class, and these companies are going through the loopholes and breaking the law to bring people into the country, to exploit them. The Prime Minister is set to unveil his cabinet, potential new blah. Warren creates a certified immigration specialist and lawyer in Ottawa. Says Carney, like Trudeau, is under a great deal of political pressure to dial back immigration levels. They realized they had to do something to slow it down, to reduce the numbers, even though it'll be ill effects on the people, their families, and their employers. He told Global News. Last year, Ottawa slashed the number of international study permits by 40% to around 360,000. It also limited eligible work hours for foreign students behind the rules around work permits available to their spouses. Those changes were in part of a series of measures announced to cool what the previous immigration minister, Mark Miller, described as an overheated system in a bid to crack down on so-called diploma mills. So, colleges and universities also are exploiting this system. And the reason that they're exploiting this system is because a lot of international students that, pay for a student visa to go to school here in Canada have to pay top-notch tuition. Which benefits these colleges and universities greatly. And that's where the term diploma mills comes from, because colleges and universities team up with NGOs, team up with these organizations to flood in as many international students to these campuses as possible. Why? So that the college or university can get the most lump sum of money through high tuition because they're international students. There are certain sectors of our economy that really take advantage of international students. You have batches of students who are going through the system, have a diploma that's really not worth anything, she said. Now you're either not eligible for work permits, or even if you have worked for a little while, they're still not going to be able to translate that into getting permanent residence into Canada. In a statement, a spokesperson for Immigration, Citizenship, and Refugees Canada said that study permits are typically issued for the length of a study program, often spanning multiple years, suggesting that the effects of the government's cuts to international student admissions have yet to not take full effect. When considering the total number of study permits issued before measures were introduced to stabilize international student numbers, the proportion of permit holders claiming asylum remains small. The statement reads, the post-secondary institutions with the highest number of international students filing asylum claims in 2024 were, and here's the list here, Canesta College with 720 claims, Seneca College for Applied Arts and Technology, 650, University du Quebec at 500 claims, Niagara College, Canada, that's my old school, my stomping grounds, at 495 claims. College de l'Est, Trois-Rivières campus, 475 claims. Global News reached out to the institutions for comment. The University du Quebec at, I can't say that, called the situation worrisome, but said it's one that has no control over. No control over. They have no control over because they've been compromised. Because they're getting a large sum of money by the international student themselves to become a student at their college campus. The NGOs that are pushing and bribing these colleges to push this. And also the government is giving subsidies to colleges and universities to push for more international students so they can get the appropriate skills to work in this country. Because there's they're saying that there's low birthing rate and there's also a skills gap. That's why they have to flood in migrants from God knows where with no checks and balances to take over the workplace instead of actually training people for those jobs. Instead of training people for the jobs that benefit this country greatly. We are not in position to know the intentions of international students where they are admitted to the university. We select them on a basis of their academic record, the university said in a statement in French. Niagara College said it's open to working with the federal government on supporting Canada's objectives under the refugee program, but adds Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada doesn't notify the school when a claim is made. In a statement in French, Ellis College pointed to a significant lack of communication between the federal and provincial immigration departments and educational institutions, explained that the college has no way of knowing if a prospective student is initially accepted, instead enters Canada only to claim asylum. Stephanie Delise, Ellis College's Director General, said his institution has asked the federal government to be notified as soon as one of their students makes a claim, but has received no response to this request. So it just seems like a whirlwind of lack of communication. And it's just turning into a major, major fiasco. But here's even more. Here's what's even more that needs to be investigated. This is Standard reports that Canada uncovers 10,000 fake fraudulent student visas, most of them from India. And that's from last year. This is from November of 2024. And as they're stating in the Global News article, that number is increasing. And again, nobody looked into this. No federal government, no RCMP investigation. Nobody's looking into this. That 10,000 fraudulent student visas, people applying to college campuses under fraudulent documents, they're paying the tuition money to the college and universities to stay quiet. So that's an open bribe right there. And they're making fraudulent documents to seek refuge into this country, and then a lot of them enter into the United States illegally. Hence why Trump kind of went ballistic with the trade, went ballistic with these tariff threats. Because one of the first things he mentioned was the fentanyl crisis and immigration. And he was concerned that Canada wasn't taking it seriously enough, hence why he was going to put tariffs on this country if Canada doesn't clean up its act. Which kind of started this whole thing. This guy, Jazz Aubrio, should international students even be allowed to file asylum claims? When you come to Canada on a student visa, you're effectively declaring under oath that you are planned to return home after your studies. That stands in direct contradiction to the premise of asylum, fleeing persecution or danger in your home country. If you can't have it both ways, if you say that you're safe enough to return, you shouldn't later claim that you're unsafe to go back. So that, I kind of agree with that. That doesn't make sense that you're claiming an asylum status, which under that status means you're fleeing from persecution, you're in danger of your country. At the same time, though, you're applying for a student visa to attend colleges. Wouldn't it make more sense to start with the asylum claim and then work your way to college? You can't have it both ways. You can't be a international student on a student visa and claim asylum refuge at the same time. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. But here, this is where it really gets interesting. Table Salt says, breaking, CBC exposes dozens of extreme immigration fraud rings in under 10 minutes of looking for it. There is no job. You pay $28,000 and we create a fake payroll. Also, CBC on probation for its very existence is the best CBC. So this is back when the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the state public broadcaster, actually had some balls. They actually had some journalistic integrity, which is why I feel sad. I feel so sad and embarrassed at what the CBC has become, because this is a very important moment uncovered by, I think this is Marketplace, that they showed this clip here. Marketplace or Fifth Estate, and they exposed the immigration human trafficking cycle that people are exploiting, this open border policy, that the flooding in of migrants into this country, people are exploiting that. And there's been numerous reports from the RCMP of human trafficking claims involved in this. Also, the UN has pointed out to Canada, but yet nothing's being done about it. So listen to this.
We contact several Facebook and Kijiji sellers.
LMI is available immediately. I'm just gonna say, hello, I am interested.
It doesn't take long to get our first response. One of the LMI sellers starts engaging us on WhatsApp.
So they're going to show you how easy it is to go online, to go onto Facebook or Kijiji, for these temporary foreign workers, as it says here, temporary foreign workers targeted by costly online immigration. So apparently there's a lot of these fraudsters that are going online claiming that if they sign up to their corporation or to their organization, that it's going to ease them access to bring them into Canada to become a temporary foreign worker, to become a migrant, to seek refuge. How is the CBC investigate this beforehand, and yet nobody's still held to account now? As we're halfway through 2025, and reports are coming that the numbers are doubling. How is that possible? How is that possible?
How much is your CRS score?
And then another seller gives us a call.
Hello.
Hello?
Hi. I received a message on WhatsApp. So looking for LMI.
Within minutes, he names his price.
This LMI is a paid LMI. It will be employer cost and the immigration lawyer cost.
Okay.
It will be total nearly $25,000 on that.
You heard right. $25,000. We play our conversation to immigration lawyer Ravi Jain.
Nearly $25,000 on that.
I can absolutely assure you that no lawyer would charge anywhere near that amount. The issue is that this person is selling an LMIA and they're paying the employer, and that's offside. They're not allowed to do that.
Yes, I just need to say.
Back in our test room, that other LMIA seller who messaged us earlier
Oh, she's calling me.
And by the way, just to point out, LMIA is an acronym for, go to the beginning here, means Labor Market Impact Assessment. So this is what corporations and companies across Canada issue to the governments, claiming if they can't hire a Canadian to fulfill their job requirements or to fulfill positions at whatever company or business that they're at, that they can apply for this and grant access to temporary foreign workers. And we know that this is being heavily exploited, that there's fraudulent documents, that corporations are deliberately going against Canadians, firing a bunch of Canadians to go down this path to get cheap labor. We know this happens with Tim Hortons. We know this happens with fast food workers. We know it happens with retailers like Walmart. Happens all over the place. And again, they're able to report all of this. CBC is able to do an investigation on this, and yet nothing, no real accountability from the federal government, from the NGOs, from the businesses, no real investigation on the exploitation matter that's continuing to cause this. It's just, I find it baffling.
Anywhere near that amount. The issue is that this person is selling an LMIA and they're paying the employer, and that's offside. They're not allowed to do that.
Yes, I just need to say.
back in our test room, that other LMIA seller who messaged us earlier
Oh, she's calling me. Hello?
with this seller, the cost is $28,000. But there's a twist.
Is there a job?
No, that's a without job.
There's no actual job. You just no.
Okay, that's outright fraud. So this person is doing something.
So what they're selling here, and the reason I'm showing you this is because, again, I'm not angry at immigrants. I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm not that great. I'm not that person. I'm very much respectful to immigrants in the legal process. And what I'm saying here is that migrants coming into Canada thinking that they're going to get better and have prosperity are also being duped by the same system. That migrants coming in are paying $28,000, hoping that it's going to provide them a job. It's going to provide them the gateways necessary to have employment, to have a home, to start a family. And they're being exploited. They're being exploited by the same companies, by the same people that are bringing these people in with the false hope of Canadian prosperity.
Very illegal, and they're doing it quite openly.
If there's no job, like in terms of the pay stubs and all, like how would that work?
So will they sharing the pay stubs like bi-weekly or so? It's just that the amount of your net pay you have to pay.
So I would have to give you the money then?
Yes.
Essentially, they're manufacturing the payroll. The program requires that there be a legitimate job associated with it, that the person's going to the job, they're getting it, they're getting paid, that there's, Canadians that are not available. That's how it's designed to work. This involves someone manufacturing a job for the purpose of getting permanent residence.
Wow. Like I said, no one's held to account on that. No one really is held to account on this heinous system. And again, I'm not anti-immigrant. I have respect for immigration. I have respect for people that want to come to this country, that want to be all they can be and contribute to, the great white north, the true north, strong and free, this country. But there has to be due process. There has to be legal statutes in place to know exactly what we're doing. Because even as Bernie Sanders once said, Bernie Sanders, who's relatively stayed quiet about immigration, surprisingly, he once said that open borders policy is a Koch brothers idea. It's the billionaire class. And without borders, without legal immigration, without the checks and balances, you have no country. And you're basically opening yourself up for a complete invasion. And sadly, that's what it kind of looks like here. It's a just complete mess of the immigration statures in this country that other immigrants, legal immigrants that went through the checks and balances, are also upset by this. And people are exploiting this for cheap labor. People are exploiting this to flood in these communities as much as possible. Flood in the communities as much as possible, grant them little wishes here and there, promise them false hope, promise them this, promise them that. Oh, if you pay your dues, blah, blah, blah. And they also get duped. We get duped as Canadians. They get duped coming into this country. And the only people that walk away with a grin on their face is the exploiters like that, like the two people at the LMIA. They were trying to sell the immigrants a pathway into Canada. And the corporations that exploit them for cheap labor. So it's a problematic situation from the top down. And no one's being held to account.